I found it in the pocket of an old jacket. Not a real cassette. I know. Nobody uses those anymore. But that's what it felt like. A cassette. One of those old things you shove in a drawer and forget about. And then one day it falls out, and suddenly you're hearing a song you thought you'd buried. It was a photograph. Printed. Actual photo paper. Which was already strange, because nobody prints photos anymore. But Dara did. Dara printed everything. She said the cloud was just somebody else's hard drive and she didn't trust it. I used to make fun of her for that. I wasn't making fun of her anymore. The photo was from the summer before last, 4th of July. We were at Priya's place up near Lake George, that long weekend that felt like it lasted a month, the one I still think about when it rains a certain way in October. Dara and I were standing at the end of the dock, the lake behind us, fireworks going off somewhere to the left. You can see the light on the water in the background. Green, then gold. And in the photo, Dara is not looking at the fireworks. She's looking at me. I don't know when Priya took it. I don't even know if Priya knew what she was taking. But I'm looking up at the sky, jaw dropped like a little kid, and Dara is turned toward me with this expression I can't quite name even now. It's not romantic, not the way movies would show it. It's quieter than that. It's the look of someone who already knows something that the other person hasn't figured out yet. I sat on the floor of my closet with that photograph for a long time. Because here's the thing I hadn't told anyone. Here's the thing I'd been folding up and shoving into jacket pockets for the better part of 2 years. That road trip we took in May, just the two of us, 12 hours in my old Subaru. Dara's feet up on the dashboard and her playlist playing, and the windows cracked even though it was still cold. She asked me something somewhere outside of Columbus. A question so small and so ordinary that I almost didn't register it. I've been thinking about it ever since. I've been thinking about why I couldn't answer it. If you want to hear uncensored, too hot for YouTube stories, check out my Patreon in the description. Dara and I met the way most people in their late 20s meet. Through someone else, at a party neither of us wanted to be at, over a shared complaint about the playlist. It was Priya's birthday. Priya had just discovered that one band, I won't name them because Dara would say I'm embarrassing myself, and every single song that night was from their first album. By the 4th track, I had migrated to the kitchen. By the 6th, I was sitting on the counter eating chips that weren't mine, and that's when Dara walked in, looked at me, looked at the chips and said, "Please tell me you're also hiding." I said I was. She said, "Thank God. I thought I was the only one with taste." I laughed. And I remember thinking, clearly and without drama, that she was the funniest person I'd met in years. That was it. That was how it started. No lightning bolt, no slow motion moment in the doorway. Just two women eating chips in somebody else's kitchen, making fun of a band, learning that they both grew up in places they couldn't wait to leave and had ended up in the same city almost by accident. By the end of the night, we had exchanged numbers. By the end of the week, we had already had coffee twice. By the end of the month, she had a key to my apartment. Not because anything was happening between us, but because I got locked out on a Tuesday, and she lived 4 blocks away, and we were already the kind of friends who don't need a reason to show up. I want to be clear about what our friendship looked like in the beginning, because I think it matters. It wasn't electric. It wasn't charged. It was easy. Dara was one of those people who made everything feel lighter without trying, who could walk into a room that was tense and somehow not contribute to the tension. She was funny and blunt, and occasionally infuriating, because she was always right, and she knew it. And she let you figure that out on your own instead of rubbing it in your face. We had the kind of friendship where you say things you don't say anywhere else, where you call at midnight, not because something is wrong, but because you just watched something, and you need to talk about it right now. Where you order food and eat it on the couch, in comfortable silence, and that feels like enough. I had a few friendships like that in college, the kind that feel permanent. Dara felt permanent from the beginning. She was a graphic designer, good at it in that way where her work looked effortless, but you could see the thinking underneath if you knew where to look. She freelanced mostly, which meant her schedule was either chaotic or completely open, and there was no predicting which. She drank her coffee black and claimed it was a personality trait. She had a cat named Billy after Holiday, who hated everyone except Dara and, inexplicably, me. I worked in urban planning. Long meetings, spreadsheets, zoning documents, the occasional breakthrough that made you feel like the last 3 years of bureaucratic mud were worth it. Not glamorous. I liked it anyway. Our lives overlapped in the easy way that lives do when two people are genuinely in each other's corners. I showed up to her gallery openings. She showed up to my neighborhood association meetings and pretended to care about setback requirements. We drove to the airport together when either of us traveled. We knew each other's families by name, by reputation, by the particular kind of dread that certain holiday conversations produced. I knew that Dara had dated women before. She'd mentioned it the way you mention anything about yourself that you've long since made peace with, matter-of-factly, without announcement, without the need for reaction. It didn't register as significant to me. It was just part of who she was. The same as the cat, or the printed photographs, or the way she always knew exactly what was wrong with a room the moment she walked in. I didn't think about it. I had no reason to think about it. I was in a relationship then, too. 2 years in with a woman named Cassie who worked in nonprofit fundraising and was extremely organized and made dinner most nights. And I was convinced, in the way you convince yourself of things, that what we had was solid. That solid was enough. That solid was, in fact, what you were supposed to be looking for after your 30s caught up with you. Dara met Cassie twice. She was polite. She was warm. She asked good questions. She never said anything bad about Cassie. Not once. But there was this one time, we were at brunch, just us. And I was telling her about some trip Cassie and I were planning, and Dara looked at me across the table with this expression I couldn't read, and she said, "Does it feel like something you want to do, or something you're supposed to want to do?" I said, "What kind of question is that?" She said, "An honest one." I changed the subject. Dara let me. And I thought about that question for 3 days afterward, and then put it in a jacket pocket, and tried not to go looking for it. That was a long time before the road trip. That was a long time before she asked me the one I really couldn't answer. I should tell you when I first noticed something was different. Not with Dara. With me. It was February, about 8 months before the road trip. Cassie and I had just come out of this long, rough patch, the kind where nobody is actively wrong, but everything is slightly off, like a picture frame that's a 1/4 inch crooked, and you can't stop seeing it. We'd had a conversation. A real one, finally. And things had gotten better, technically. On paper. We were being nicer to each other. We were trying. And I was sitting in Dara's living room one evening, Billy asleep on my lap, Dara on the other end of the couch with her laptop, both of us working in companionable silence. And I had this sudden, almost violent awareness of how comfortable I felt. Not comfortable like okay. Comfortable like accurate. Like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I looked over at her. She had her glasses on. She only wore them when she was working, and she always tried to take them off when she thought someone might notice. She was chewing on the end of her pen, which she always did when she was concentrating. Her hair was up in the kind of bun that happens by accident and looks better than anything intentional could. She must have felt me looking because she glanced up. "What?" "Nothing," I said. "You have ink on your lip." She wiped it the wrong side. I watched her do it. I didn't tell her she'd missed. It was such a small, stupid moment. But I drove home that night, and I sat in my car outside my apartment building, and I thought, why did I not tell her? Why did I let her walk around with ink on her lip? Why did that feel like something I wanted to keep? I didn't have an answer. I told myself I was tired. A month later, Dara started seeing someone. Her name was Ren. She was an architect, clean-cut and calm, the kind of person who seemed like they had a handle on everything. They met at one of those design events Dara went to occasionally. She told me over the phone, and I remember sitting at my kitchen table listening and feeling something I chose not to identify. "She sounds great," I said. "She is," Dara said. There was a pause. "You okay?" "Of course. Why wouldn't I be?" Another pause, shorter than the first. "No reason. Just checking." I didn't sleep well that night. I told myself it was the coffee. I'd had a second cup too late in the day. I started noticing things. That's the only way I can describe it. Like whatever filter I'd been using had started to malfunction, and details were getting through that weren't supposed to. The way Dara's voice dropped a little when she was telling me something she actually cared about. The way she listened, not waiting for her turn to talk. Actually listening, tracking what you said, asking the follow-up question that proved she'd been paying attention. The way she always remembered things I'd mentioned in passing weeks before. My sister's surgery, the project I'd been stressed about, whether the coffee place near my office had fixed their espresso machine. I kept noticing. I kept telling myself it was just appreciation. She was a good friend. I noticed things about good friends. But then Cassie and I would be sitting at dinner, and I'd catch myself thinking about something Dara had said that afternoon. Not anything remarkable, just something funny, some observation she'd made about a building we passed, and I'd feel this low-grade guilt I couldn't explain, like I was somewhere else in a way I didn't have the vocabulary for. Spring came. Dara and Ren seemed to be going well. I hadn't met Ren yet. Dara was slow to integrate relationships, always had been, and I'd long since learned not to rush her. But she mentioned Ren easily, with that particular tone people use when something is new and good, and they're still being careful not to jinx it. I was happy for her. I was trying to be happy for her. And then there was this afternoon in April where Dara and I met for a walk. Just a walk, nothing planned. It was the first warm Saturday in months, and neither of us could justify staying inside. We ended up at this park near her place where there were these cherry trees that only bloom for about 10 days, and we had managed, by complete accident, to hit the exact peak. She stopped under one of the trees and looked up, and the light came through the branches the way light only does in early April in the Northeast, that particular gold that doesn't exist in any other season. And I stopped walking and looked at her instead of the trees, and I felt something move in my chest. Something definite. Something I couldn't call appreciation. I looked away immediately. I kept walking. I said something. I don't even remember what. About how we should do this every year. Make it a tradition. The cherry tree walk. She laughed and said yes, and linked her arm through mine the way she sometimes did, and I thought about nothing but my own heartbeat for the next 4 blocks. That night, I called my sister Nina, which I almost never do about personal things. "Can I ask you something weird?" I said. "When have I ever said no to that?" "Is it possible," I said, very carefully, "to not know something about yourself until you're 34? A pause. "What are you asking me exactly?" "Nothing," I said. "Never mind. How's your knee?" Nina let me change the subject. But before she did, she said quietly, "Yes. By the way, the answer is yes. It's possible at any age." I hung up thinking she had misunderstood. I spent 2 weeks hoping that was true. The thing is, and this is the part that's hard to explain without making it sound more dramatic than it wasn't like a door flying open. It was more like a door I'd been leaning against for years, very casually, not even thinking about it. And one day I shifted my weight and realized there was nothing on the other side. I didn't call it anything yet. I was still calling it appreciating a good friend. But there were mornings, quiet Tuesday mornings when I was just making coffee and thinking about nothing in particular, when Dara's name would surface in my mind with this particular warmth. and I would stand there holding my mug and feel something that I had spent a long time in my life waiting to feel for someone and had mostly convinced myself was just a thing in movies. And I would tell myself, "You are making something out of nothing." I believed that. I kept choosing to believe that. Right up until the road trip. Right up until she asked me the question I couldn't answer. I need to tell you about the drive. Cassie and I had broken up in March. Not badly. No explosion, no betrayal, nothing dramatic enough to be clean. Just that slow, honest unraveling that happens when two people finally admit they've been kind to each other for a long time, but they haven't been true to each other. We cried a little. We hugged. She kept the houseplants. I kept the good pan. I was okay. I wasn't pretending to be okay. I actually was. And that told me something I wasn't ready to examine yet. Dara and Ren had ended around the same time. I didn't ask too much about it. Dara said it was mutual, and she seemed okay too. And we were both, I think, in that particular post-relationship state where you feel surprisingly light and slightly suspicious of that lightness. The road trip was already planned. We'd been talking about driving down to see a land conservation project in western Tennessee that I'd been following professionally, and Dara wanted to photograph some of the landscape out there for a series she was working on. We'd said we'd do it in May. We did. It was 12 hours each way. We split it. Drive down, spend 2 days, drive back. 3 nights in a rented house on the edge of a wildlife corridor, which sounds much more rustic than it was. It had a good kitchen and a porch that looked out over a field of switchgrass that turned silver in the late afternoon light. The first day of driving was easy. The way it always is when it's still novel, when the road hasn't gone on long enough to start feeling like it. We talked about the project I was researching and the landscape series she was developing, and whether we'd listened to this one podcast episode yet, and what we thought about Priya's recent life decisions and whether it was a moral failure to buy gas station coffee when you'd already had 2 cups that morning. We stopped for lunch somewhere in Kentucky. The second stretch was quieter. That companionable quiet that I had always loved about being in a car with Dara. The kind where you didn't need to fill the space, where the radio or a playlist was enough, where you could look out the window for 20 minutes without explanation. We were somewhere outside Columbus when the playlist ended, and neither of us moved to restart it. Dara had her seat reclined slightly, not sleeping, just resting. Her feet were on the dashboard. She was wearing these old sneakers she'd had for years, paint-stained on the left one from a mural she helped with in Bed-Stuy. The afternoon light was coming in at a low angle, making everything in the car the color of old photographs. She said, out of nowhere, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure," I said. She didn't ask it right away. There was a pause that lasted maybe 15 seconds, which sounds short, but in a moving car with no music is a long time. I kept my eyes on the road. "When you were with Cassie," she said, and her voice was casual, genuinely casual, not leading anywhere on purpose as far as I could tell. "Were you happy? Like, actually?" I should have been able to answer that. It is such a simple question. Were you happy? Yes or no? You were an adult woman in a relationship for 2 years. You should have access to this information. I opened my mouth, and nothing came out. Not for the worst reason. Not because the answer was devastating, but because the honest answer, the real one, was, I don't know. I really don't know. And I was realizing, in real time, in a moving car on the highway, that I didn't know what I'd been using as the comparison. Happy compared to what? Happy compared to this? Dara must have noticed the silence because she said quickly, "You don't have to answer that. I was just thinking about things. Ignore me." "No, I stopped. I'm thinking. Take your time." I drove for another mile, maybe 2. "I think I was content," I said finally. "I think that's what I was." Dara was quiet for a moment. "That's different." "Yeah," I said. "I know." And that was it. She didn't push. She didn't say anything else about it. The playlist started again on its own. Her shuffle had looped. And we drove the last 2 hours talking about other things. And by the time we got to Tennessee, the conversation had been gently, mutually set aside. But I couldn't set it aside. I drove the rest of the way with both hands on the wheel and my heart doing something I couldn't quite classify. And I thought, why did I hesitate? It was a question about my own feelings. I should have known. Why didn't I know? And beneath that question, louder and more uncomfortable, happy compared to what were you measuring it against? I knew the answer. I had known the answer, I think, since April, under the cherry trees. I just hadn't said it to myself yet. Not in words. Not clearly. It was still this thing I was keeping just below the surface of conscious thought, where I could feel the heat of it without having to name it. The house in Tennessee was small and warm and smelled like cedar and old books. There were 2 bedrooms. The kitchen had a cast-iron skillet that someone had seasoned for years. The porch faced west. We made dinner the first night. Dara cooked, which she did well when she was relaxed, and I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of wine and watched her work, and tried very hard not to think about what I was thinking about. She had this way of cooking where she was completely unselfconscious. Most people are a little performative in a kitchen, even when they're alone. Dara just cooked, like she wasn't aware she could be observed. She tasted things off the wooden spoon and made little adjustments and hummed something under her breath that I almost recognized. "What is that?" I said. "What?" "That song, what you're humming." She stopped and thought about it. "I have no idea. It's just been in my head all day. It's nice." She looked at me over her shoulder. Just for a second. Just long enough. "Yeah?" "Yeah." She turned back to the stove. I looked down at my wine. We ate on the porch, because the night was warm enough, and neither of us could justify being inside with that sky. Tennessee sky in May is something different. Deep and layered. Stars that seem closer than they do anywhere north. We sat across from each other at this little table that barely fit 2 plates, and we talked about everything and nothing, the way we always did, and I was so aware of her in a way I'd never been, in a way that felt both new and completely familiar, like remembering rather than discovering. At one point she laughed at something I said, a real laugh, not polite, the one that made her close her eyes and tip her head back slightly. And I felt that laugh somewhere in my sternum, and I thought, I am in so much trouble. The second day, she spent most of the morning outside with her camera, and I walked the land with my field notes, and we met back at the house at noon. She had mud on her boots, and the specific kind of satisfied expression that she got when she'd gotten good material. She showed me a few shots on the small camera screen, the switchgrass up close, the way the light hit the creek, a bird she hadn't been able to identify that was just sitting there like it wanted to be photographed. "These are incredible," I said. "The light out here is insane." She scrolled to another. "Look at this one." I looked at the screen. Then I looked at her looking at the screen. The way her attention narrowed when she was evaluating her own work. That small crease between her brows. The way she bit her lower lip slightly, still not satisfied, still looking for the thing she wanted. I looked back at the screen. I said, "That one's my favorite." She looked up. "Yeah? Why that one?" "It feels like the place," I said. "Like if you showed it to someone who'd never been here, they'd feel it exactly right." Something in her expression shifted. Something quiet. That's exactly what I was going for. We looked at each other for a moment longer than usual. Then she scrolled to the next photo, and I made myself breathe. That night, late, we were sitting on the porch with the lights off because there was enough moonlight to see by, and Dara was talking about what she wanted to do next. Not with the series, but with her work overall, with her life, where she wanted to be in 3 years. She talked about it with this particular quality of voice she had when she was thinking something out, rather than reporting something decided. Open, a little uncertain, very honest. I listened. I always listened to Dara because listening to her think was one of my favorite things, and I'd spent 2 years not letting myself notice that. At some point she said, "Do you ever feel like you've been waiting for your own life to start? Like you've been in this long rehearsal and you keep saying you'll do the real thing later?" I said, quietly. "Yeah, I know exactly what you mean." She looked at me. The moonlight was enough to see her face. "What are you waiting for?" I didn't answer. I couldn't answer that one either, because the answer was sitting right across from me on that porch, and she didn't know it, and I had no idea what to do with that. We drove home 2 days later. I found a reason to keep the radio on most of the time. Dara talked more than I did, which was unlike our usual balance, and I wonder now if she could feel me pulling back, the way I was constructing a careful distance that I told myself was necessary and healthy. I spent the following 3 weeks being a very busy person. I worked late. I took on extra projects. I texted Dara back a little slower than I usually did, which felt terrible and also felt necessary, like keeping your hand away from something you know will burn you. She didn't comment on it, not directly, but she sent me a photo one afternoon, printed, mailed, which she never did except for special occasions, and it was one of the shots from Tennessee, the switchgrass at dusk, and on the back, in her handwriting, just, this one ended up being my favorite too. For the record, I kept it in the pocket of my jacket for a week before I moved it to the drawer by my bed. I kept asking myself, "What are you afraid of?" And I kept not answering, until I couldn't not answer anymore. But before I tell you how it ended, if you've made it this far, then you already know why this story matters. You've felt this, that terrible specific feeling of knowing something about yourself and not being ready to say it out loud yet. Click the like button right now. It takes 1 second, and it helps this channel more than you know. And if you're not subscribed yet, subscribe and hit the bell. That way YouTube tells you when the next story drops. Now, I need to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever been asked a question so simple that you couldn't answer it? Not because you didn't know, but because the answer meant you had to finally be honest about something you'd been avoiding? Tell me. I read every single one. And tell me where you're watching from. I'll heart every city. Now, back to the story. I'll tell you the exact moment I stopped running. It was a Wednesday. Nothing remarkable about it from the outside. Gray sky, the particular flat light of late October, the smell of wet leaves everywhere. I had been in a long meeting about a stormwater infrastructure project, the kind that goes 2 hours past when it was supposed to end. I was tired in that specific way that isn't just physical, that particular tiredness that comes from spending a lot of energy pretending. I walked home. And somewhere on the last block, my phone buzzed. Dara. A voice memo, which she sent sometimes when she was walking and didn't want to type. I put my earbuds in. "Hey," she said, her voice in my ear. "I've been thinking about you today, I don't know why. I drove past that cafe near your office, the one that finally fixed the espresso machine, and I thought about texting you to go there sometime. And then I just kept thinking about you. And that was weird because now I'm sending you a voice memo about it, which is maybe weirder, and I don't know what I'm saying. I just wanted you to know I was thinking about you. Okay, bye." I stood on the sidewalk with the gray sky above me and my hand pressed flat against my sternum, because that's apparently what my body needed to do in that moment. She was thinking about me. She sent me a voice memo to tell me she was thinking about me. And instead of the thing I'd been doing for 3 months, the filing away, the careful distance, the insistence that I was making something out of nothing, I just stood there and let myself feel it, all of it. The whole weight of what I'd been carrying since April, since the cherry trees, since the car outside Columbus when she asked me if I'd been happy and I couldn't answer, Since every single evening in her living room and every late night on my couch, and every moment I'd noticed something about her and tried to call it something other than what it was. I let it be what it was. And what it was so much bigger than I had let myself understand. It was the kind of feeling that made 2 years of patient contentment look, in retrospect, like a very long and polite misunderstanding. It was the feeling I had been calling the comparison point and refusing to examine. It was the answer to a question I'd been asked in a car outside Columbus and hadn't been ready to speak out loud. I stood there for probably 2 full minutes. Then I texted her, "Can I come over tonight?" She texted back in 30 seconds. Of course. I walked to her apartment. I'd done it hundreds of times. It took 11 minutes. And I spent every one of those minutes trying to figure out what I was going to say and arriving at nothing, no script, no plan. Just the certainty that I needed to be in the same room as her and stop pretending that I didn't need that. She opened the door and she looked at me. Just looked. That specific way she had. The one where she didn't immediately say something, where she let the moment be a moment. And something in her expression told me she'd been here before. That she'd been waiting in this particular place, maybe, for longer than I knew. "Hi," she said. "Hi." Billy wrapped around my ankles. I looked down at the cat. I laughed a little, out of nerves, and Dara stepped back to let me in. Her apartment smelled like she'd been cooking something earlier. Garlic, herbs, that warmth that a kitchen leaves in an apartment for hours after. There were new prints on her work table, spread out to dry. A cup of tea going cold on the coffee table. She didn't ask me anything. She just sat on the couch, tucking her feet under her, and waited. And I sat down on the other end, and I didn't say what I'd planned to say because I hadn't planned anything, and I said instead, "I've been thinking about what you asked me, in the car, about Cassie." "Okay," she said, not surprised, just steady. "I told you I was content," I said. And that was true, but I didn't tell you what made me realize that was the right word and not a better one. Dara was very still. "It was being around you," I said. "It was every time I'd come here or we'd talk or you'd... It wasn't like being with Cassie. It wasn't the same. And I kept telling myself it was just because you're my best friend, that of course things felt different, that I was confusing closeness with something else. I kept telling myself that for months. I stopped, breathed. I was wrong. I was confusing it the other way around. The apartment was quiet. Billy had settled at the end of the couch between us, apparently unimpressed by the enormity of what was happening. Dara said, very softly, "How long have you known?" "I think since April," I said. "The cherry trees." Something crossed her face. Something I recognized, looking back, as relief. "Can I tell you something?" she said. "Yeah." "That photograph Priya took, 4th of July. I went very still. The one of us on the dock. "I asked her to print it," Dara said. "I asked her for a copy. I've had it for over a year." I stared at her. I didn't know how to... She stopped, started again. "You were with Cassie. And even after, I didn't know if you were..." She looked at me. Direct, clear, very Dara. "I didn't know what you were figuring out about yourself. I didn't want to push you somewhere before you were ready." "So you just waited." I tried not to want anything. She exhaled slowly. "I wasn't very good at it." I laughed. I couldn't help it. That specific helpless laugh that comes out of relief when you realize you've both been carrying the same thing. "You could have told me," I said. "I know." A pause. "You could have too." "I didn't know yet." "I know that too." We sat there for a moment, the distance between us on the couch. Not much. A cushion's width, the length of a year's worth of careful circling. Felt enormous and very specific, like a thing with a shape. "I'm not sure what I'm doing," I said. "I want you to know that up front. I don't have this figured out. I pressed my palms together between my knees. "I'm still learning the vocabulary for it, honestly." Dara nodded. "That's okay. I just know that I should have answered you in that car," I said. "And the answer would have been, I wasn't. Not the way I wanted to be. Not the way I am when I'm with you." Silence. Not empty silence. The full kind. The kind that's made of everything that's been said, and everything that doesn't need to be said because it's already known. Dara looked at me. The lamplight was warm, the orange of late afternoon preserved in an artificial glow. I could hear the city outside, the low, consistent sound of it, and inside, everything was still. She reached over Billy and took my hand. She just held it. She didn't say anything. She just held my hand in that specific way, certain without being possessive, warm without being overwhelming, and looked at me like she had in the photograph on the dock, like she already knew something that I was still catching up to. And I felt, for the first time in a long time, like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, not content, not going through the right motions. Actually there, actually present, actually myself, in the fullest sense of that word. I thought about the photograph in my jacket pocket. I thought about a voice memo I'd played 3 times on a gray October sidewalk. I thought about a question asked outside of Columbus that I had been answering, slowly, without knowing it, for the better part of 6 months. I didn't say any of that out loud. I didn't need to. She already knew. I called Nina the next morning. She picked up on the second ring, which she almost never does before 10. "Hey," she said. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Actually, yeah." A pause. Then, with the particular intuition of an older sister who has been waiting for a very specific phone call. "Okay, tell me." I told her. I told her about the road trip, and the question I couldn't answer, and the months of carefully folding everything up and putting it away. I told her about standing on a sidewalk, listening to a voice memo with my hand on my chest. I told her about sitting on a couch with Billy between us, and saying the thing out loud, finally, after all that. Nina was quiet when I finished. Then she said, "Do you remember what I said? When you called me in the spring, that it's possible at any age." "Yeah." A pause. "Was I right?" I laughed. "You were right." "I know," she said, warmly, unsmugly, the way people are when they've been rooting for you and they're glad it worked out. "I'm really happy for you." I got off the phone and stood in my kitchen for a long time with my coffee, looking at nothing, just feeling the particular quality of that morning. October light on the countertops, the city going about its business outside, my own life, which somehow felt both entirely new and exactly like it had always been waiting to be this. I pulled the printed photo from my bedside drawer. Me and Dara on the dock at Lake George. The fireworks in the background. The light on the water. Her looking at me in that way I'd been trying not to name. I'd been carrying this thing for months without knowing I was carrying it. I'd been building a case against myself in the dark, running from the evidence, mistaking the trial for the thing itself. And here was the thing I'd learned, standing in my kitchen on an ordinary October morning. You can spend a very long time being the wrong shape in the right life. And sometimes it takes someone looking at you from across a dock, looking at you instead of the fireworks, to show you what shape you actually are. I texted Dara, "Good morning." "How's Billy?" She texted back a photograph. Billy. On her keyboard. Unrepentant. And then, "Good morning. How are you?" I typed back 3 drafts and deleted them all and finally sent, "Better than I've been in a long time." Actually, better. I set my phone down. The kitchen was warm, The coffee was good. The city was outside, doing what cities do, indifferent and enormous and full of people in their own particular process of becoming. I had made a choice that cost me something. Not everything, but something. I'd had a version of myself that knew all its own edges, a story I'd been telling about my life that had very little room in it for revision. And I'd let that go. It was still going. Some of the conversations hadn't happened yet. Some of the reckonings were still ahead. My family, the friends who'd known me as a certain kind of person, all the rooms I'd have to walk back into as someone slightly different. I wasn't going to pretend that was easy, but I was going to do it whole. For the first time, I was going to do it as myself. And whatever the cost, it would be the cost of something true. That's the only kind of cost that doesn't compound. I finally had what I'd spent so long trying not to want. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't certain. It was me, whole, not running. And sometimes the greatest courage isn't a grand gesture. It's just the quiet act of finally telling the truth. If this story found something in you, if you've been carrying your own question you haven't answered yet, write courage in the comments. That's how I know you made it here with me. And if you want to keep going on these stories that move something real inside you, click the video on your screen right now. Big love, and until the next story. If you want to hear uncensored, too hot for YouTube stories, check out my Patreon in the description.